Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talking about a fairly important topic in both micro and macro economies, and it is called the trade barriers. So what is the trade barriers? Well, we can basically thinking about that it's the limit amount of goods that we imported from other countries that we want to set a limit of that in order to protect our domestic producers. And there are two main ways that we can do this. First is by setting a tariff, and the other one is the quotas. Well, what are these two things really means? Well, first of all, the tariffs is basically the tax that you put on the imports and exports of goods. And the quotas, on the other hand, is the limits that you set on quantity of goods that you imported from other countries. So first, let's think about the basic DS models that before the trade, okay? So I think that's the basic graph that you will learn in your economics classes. So this is like the price, and this is the quantity, and this is the demand, the supply. Remember, demand is always goes down and supply is always goes up. And then this is before the trade, right? And this amount is the producer surplus. And this is the consumer surplus. And this is the producer surplus, and this is the resources cost, right? And then, so you can see that this is the graph that before trade, before world trade. So then, look at this graph. You can see that there's no debt we lost in this graph, right? It's very nice, it's very neat, it's very beautiful. So we can see this is the consumer surplus, producer surplus. They're all like two almost equal amounts of triangles. Well, that's not the case if we started to do some things like set a tariffs or quotas when we are starting the world trade, okay? So then this is the graph that after trade. And let's think about the tariffs, okay? So tariff graphs. So we started by drawing the basic DS models first. Price, quantity. This is the demand and this is the supply. Okay, and so then think about that. So for example, I set a world price right here. Okay, so at this price, the domestic producers would like to produce this amount of things. Okay, and then but the same time the consumers, they're wanting this amount of things. Okay, so then like there's a gap between them. So who should fill up this gap? Well, it must from foreign producers. So this amount is the amount that we have to import from other countries. And then after this, you can see that the consumer surplus is becoming this whole triangle. See that? It becomes very big. And at the same time, the producer surplus has been like shrinked very much. So it's only of this, and this is the resources cost. So you can see who is benefit from the tariffs. Who is benefit from like the world trade before we set a tariff on it? Well, definitely should be consumers, right? Because consumer surplus is becoming so big, but the producer surplus is becoming so small. So then the domestic producers are angry about that. They're not happy because I couldn't get the amount of surplus that I can get before. So then in order to protect the domestic producers, the government have to do something. Well, what they should have to do is that the same thing in here. So this is the world price, and after they set a tariff on it. So for example, they set a tariff right here. So this is the tariff, and you can see the tariff is definitely higher than the world price. So then this is the amount of import that before we set a tariff, and this is the amount of import that after we set a tariff. And you can see that the producer surplus has becoming like this amount of this small triangles is becoming like this large triangle. Like this whole thing has becoming the producer surplus. Sorry, the pen doesn't work right now, but you can see that from the graph. You get the deal. So this is the whole triangle that right now is the producer surplus, and then this whole thing has become the consumer surplus. And you can see that the consumer surplus is still larger than like the graph right here, right? The before the trade, the consumer surplus area, but it's still like not enough. Then it's still not big enough with the tariffs, and the producer surplus, however, has becoming larger than than before setting the tariff. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually should like say so this is the graph that we world trade, like a free trade before we set the tariff. So this is before tariff, and this is after tariff. Oh. Okay. So then you can think that, oh, definitely the producer surplus has been higher than before we set the tariff of the world trade, and then the domestic producers must be like happier than before, even though they still can get the same amount of surplus before they start the world trade, but they're still better off, right? And so like let's look deeply with the graph. So this is the amount of import like after the tariff, okay? And so we can see that this like a little rectangle right here, well, what is that? Well, this is the government revenue. So this is the amount of money that goes into government, right? Because government set a higher price level, which is reduces the amount of import goods from other countries, and the money that they left over has been given to the government. And then these two triangles, you might be noticed and wondering what's that? Well, these are the deadweight laws. So, and that's definitely, it's an arguable point that a lot of people have, because the tariffs, even though it's benefit to the domestic producers, however, it's not sufficient from the economist perspective, because what's the most efficient thing is that you have to allocate your resources fully. So then, like the top graph that we first drawn is the very resources sufficient, efficient graph, right? But after you set the tariffs, and the same thing as quotas that we'll draw later, they both cause a deadweight loss to the whole economy, right? So it's not the best way to do it, but well, you have to think about perspectively, right? From different perspectives. If you like think about it from the domestic producers' views, then it's probably better for the short terms, but it still causes some deadweight loss, which is not good from the whole like long terms perspective. Okay, never mind. Let's go back to the graph. Okay, so then this amount of things. Okay, so this is still the resources cost, and then this thing. What do you think that will be? Well, this is the foreign revenue. So then this is the amount of money, the amount of like surplus, all of that things that goes into other countries after the tariffs been set into the world trade. Okay, so these are all of the tariffs graphs. So then let's move on to the quotas. Well, quotas, as I said before, it's kind of similar with the tariff, but except it's not gonna cost any government revenues. And that's just the quantity that you limit, like to the goods that you imported from other countries. So let's start by drawing this. So first of all, we can just go into like straightforward. So I will just go like after quotas, what does the graph look like? So then price, quantity, demand, surplus, and then the quotas. Like for example, the same thing. Price level before we set the quotas is right here. And after we set a quota, like for example, like price level right here is like $10. And then the quantity right here will be 100. And this is like 500. And then we're gonna set a 200 quantities of quotas, right? So right now, like we imported 400 from other countries, and then we only want to import 200 from other countries. So what should we do? Well, you should know that if we only want to import 200 quantities, but the consumers are demand the same amount of goods, right? So what does that mean? That will cause a shortage. So what do you think about shortage? Like the shortage, every time when there's a shortage, it will drive price up. So that means it will move the graph right here. So it will actually draw the price up. So this is the price like after the quotas. And then this amount that corresponding with it will just be 200 and then 400, right? So then this is the amount of 200 that we imported from other countries. And then let's think about this graph. So then this is the producer surplus before you set the we set the quotas, and then this is the producer surplus that after we set the quotas. And then this amount still is the consumer surplus, which you can basically see is smaller than the trade, like the world trade, but it's it's smaller than the free trade, like before you do anything like the tariffs and the quotas, but it's definitely larger still than the trade that you before the trade. Okay, so then this amount of things, instead of going to the government revenue, it's just it just doesn't go anywhere. Like this whole thing actually will be the foreign revenues. Is it that? Okay. Yeah. So actually, like this thing, I don't think like the AP test will actually be testing of you like for like which part is corresponding which. I mean, definitely you should know where is the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, but I don't think like they will test you very much on the quotas thing. So definitely the tariffs graph is the most important graph that you have to know, and you are being able to draw it. But the quotas graph, I don't think the AP test will test you on it. So then just to remember that quotas is the limit amount that you set it on the goods that you imported from other countries. And remember, the aim for both of the two actions is to protect the domestic producers. So then the producer surplus will be larger. Okay, so yeah, so that's basically everything that you should know for the tariff and the quotas. And remember, these are all the trade barriers, which you can think that from different perspective. Someone will argue it will be better and someone will not, but it really depends on different situations and different backgrounds. But just remember that these two actions are like very useful and very basically two things that we that we, like, not we, but like the government and all of that things are dealing with other countries. And when we are talking about like the international trade and the world trade, these two things that is the thing that we basically concerning about. Okay, so then these are all of the things, and I hope you learned something from this video. And if you like my video, please subscribe and leave some comments below. I would like to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day.